Chærete, friends. Welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today we're going to be talking about serial killers of sorts within the mythology of the ancient Greek hero Theseus. Serial killers, as we know and think about them, moving around in the real world in modern times, I'm sure existed to some degree and in some capacity in the ancient world, but unfortunately it's just something that we know little to nothing about. There's just no ancient Roman equivalent of unsolved cases or the latest Netflix doc on Ted Bundy. They just didn't really write about things like that, at least very often. What we do have is tons and tons of mythology. We have so many different stories about the different gods and the different heroes. And something a little strange that I noticed recently was that most of the monsters that the Greek hero Theseus faces and overcomes aren't technically really monsters. They're not like the Minotaur or the Sphinxes or the Chimera or any of those things. They're kind of just dudes who really like killing people. They are usually specified to be robbers. So they're partially motivated to kill you so that they can take your stuff. But in most of these stories, I don't see that it's really necessary for them to kill you in order for them to take your stuff. They could just tie you up and throw you out in the woods and let you die there. They don't have to personally chop you into bits. And then the other thing is that, again, most of these stories are excessively violent. It's completely unnecessary how they go about killing these people. And so it seems to me that they aren't just killing in order to feed their families, that they really enjoy killing. And so my task that I have set for myself for this video is to go through all of these stories, look at all of these killers, and in the comments at the end, you can let me know if there is something here or if I'm just crazy. This first one is relatively tame. This is Periphates, who in some accounts is a demigod. People give different divine fathers for him. But apparently his thing was to roam around the roads surrounding Athens and ambush people. So we're going to take a look at a passage from Plutarch, who wrote a biography of the hero Theseus, to look at how he describes him. And so in the first place, in Epidaria, when Periphates, who used a club as his weapon, and on this account was called club-bearer, laid hold of him, Theseus, and tried to stop his progress. He grappled with him and slew him. And being pleased with the club, he took it and made it his weapon, and continued to use it just as Heracles did with a lion's skin. It seems totally plausible to me that there was actually someone, and honestly, more likely many people, bandits and wild men, wandering around ancient Greece, terrorizing people with clubs. That just seems highly likely, and then it, over time, got incorporated into this mythos and these myths around Theseus. That seems pretty straightforward. Our next guy, though, is a bit more out there, definitely more interesting. His name is Sinus, and his other name is Pitiocampes, which basically means the pine bender, because his modus operandi of killing people was that he would basically tie them to two different pine trees. So he would bend the pine trees down, tie the victim to each of the pine trees, and then release the trees. So when they pop back up and away from each other, the victim gets essentially ripped in half. So again, just totally excessive, completely unnecessary way to kill someone, but apparently he really got a kick out of this. So when Theseus comes along and discovers his trick, he actually kills Sinus or Pitiocampes with trees. He performs his own dirty tricks on Sinus, so it's pretty violent way to take somebody out, but I guess he deserved it. And then afterwards, just for good measure, Theseus also seduces his daughter. So it's a more wild story for sure. Next we have Skyron, who might just be my favorite in this list, and there are several different stories about him that have slightly different details, but we're going to take a look at another passage from Plutarch just to get an idea of what this story was like. Theseus also slew Skyron on the borders of Megara by hurling him down the cliffs. Skyron robbed the passers-by according to the prevalent tradition, but as some say, he would insolently and wantonly thrust out his feet to strangers and bid them wash them, and then, while they were washing them, kick them off into the sea. Unfortunately, it doesn't show up in this passage actually, but my favorite detail that does show up in some other versions is that he is assisted by a giant turtle that lives at the bottom of this cliff and just swallows up all of the people that he kicks off of it. So I really love that. Next up, we have Carachion, who apparently was really into wrestling, and he would challenge everyone that he met into a wrestling match to the death and would threaten to just kill them outright if they refused to wrestle him. In Eleusis, he slew Carachion, son of Broncos and a nymph Argiope. This Carachion compelled passersby to wrestle, and in wrestling, killed them. But Theseus lifted him up on high and dashed him to the ground. Allegedly, after this legendary wrestling battle, Theseus is either inspired and or he is threatened by the family of Carachion. They're very upset, obviously, and so to sort of make restitution and to appease them and make them not want to come after and kill him, he pays a whole lot of money to institute games. The Olympian Games weren't the only ones in the ancient world, there were many different ones, and so he institutes his own that are focused on wrestling, and again, allegedly, this was the first time that wrestling became sort of an established, institutionalized sport. Next, we have Procrustes, which you may actually have heard of. So he had a tavern of sorts along the road, and he, again, would target travelers. So he would invite them into this tavern or into his home, and he would offer to let them spend the night in this special bed that he had made himself. And once they were in bed, he would tie them down, and then he would make them fit the dimensions of the bed. So once they were tied down and all spread out, he would see if any parts of them hung off of the bed, so if they were too tall, and then he would just chop those bits off. And if they were too short, then he would take a hammer and beat their body parts out until they were stretched enough to meet the edges of the bed. So again, very gruesome, completely gratuitous violence, but eventually put to an end by Theseus and his heroics. There are one or two miscellaneous others, but the last one that I want to bring up for this video is named Freya, because she is potentially a female bandit, which is interesting. Let's take a look at the quote from Plutarch. Now, the Crommyonian sow, which they called Freya, was no insignificant creature, but fierce and hard to master. This sow Theseus went out of his way to encounter and slay, that he might not be thought to perform all his exploits under compulsion. And at the same time, because he thought that while the brave man ought to attack villainous men only in self-defense, he should seek occasion to risk his life in battle with a nobler beast. However, some say that Freya was a female robber, a woman of murderous and unbridled spirit who dwelt in Crommyon, was called sow because of her life and manners, and was afterwards slain by Theseus. So there you have it. If nothing else, a list of ancient Greece's most murderous and sadistic characters. I'm interested to hear all of your thoughts. Thank you so much for checking out this video. A special thank you, as always, to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Chαίrete.